All right. I believe this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and sizes and persuasions, welcome to another Monday morning tech chat show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka SomeGadgetGuy, the SGG of this terribly named podcast. But of course, the QA stands for question and answers. We like to make this an interactive conversation, dig into some of our favorite tech topics over the last couple weeks, follow through on some of the tech news and tech politics, and make sure we're keeping our eyes on the prize as these stories unravel really, really quickly. And we can't just stay informed if we're only looking at the headlines. Matt Tyler is correct. This is a terrible podcast name, but I'm not going to change it. I'm sticking to my guns. It's purposely bad, and I kind of like that it's unique in its terribleness. I greatly appreciate those of you helping to spread the word. Fat Produce, Rolando, Aditya Anil. I'm seeing some retweets and some sharing action on this. We're not going to be streaming this one on YouTube. I try to save the YouTube sharing for, or YouTube streaming for very special circumstances. Last week we had TK Bay on to wrap up our phone challenge. We had a really long conversation about productivity phones. And then the week before that, it was doing an unboxing. Something special that I think is kind of more YouTubery, but for the most part, I like my Twitch community and I like my Twitch stream, and I don't have to worry about YouTube shenanigans while I'm trying to talk about some sensitive issues. And we've got some tech politics to cover this week. We're going to have quite a bit to say as there was some pretty big news over the weekend. And then I want to wrap it up with a fun gadget block looking at some cheaper 5G options in North America and following up on getting the Microsoft Surface Duo. So kind of bookending phones at the entry level or mid-range of the market and phones that are significantly more expensive. So I'm seeing Matt Tyler, Dave Burns, Fat Produce, Nick Fell, Walt, My Tech Review, Root Knight, Kiyotarusanti. I didn't do that right, but we're seeing a good crew here, and Al Spockley, Vasikose, RJ King. All right, some great names, some great chatter. We're going to have a fun conversation. Wes Easton saying, did something happen over the weekend? I mean, nothing of note. Nothing worth talking about, right? It's all pretty chill. I'm kind of torn. I want to start off this week's podcast, this week's conversation, as sort of a in memoriam. I'm not sure how much time I want to spend on housekeeping this week because we didn't do housekeeping last week, and I put out a lot of content over the last 2 weeks. But I think it's I think it's sort of mandatory. I think it's necessary that we start this week's show off with just kind of following up on the feels of Alex Trebek passing away, where he was recently, I believe even just less than a month ago, he was still hosting and producing new episodes of Jeopardy. And it's funny. I mean, it's not like I've ever had the opportunity to meet him. It's not like I've ever worked with him. But there's just a cultural awareness of an individual like Alex Trebek. And my entire life, as long as I can remember, there was this safety blanket of this silly little game show, a trivia show called Jeopardy. And my wife and I are huge Jeopardy nerds. It's not that we sit and watch and we try and answer all the questions. It's one of those shows that has just always been in the fog of the background. It's safe to put on. Lex can sing the theme song. It's just been a part of my television experience my entire life. And in his passing, there's this little sadness, this little hole, this someone again, it's not like he represented some grand figure, social justice or political acumen, or it wasn't that he was such an important figure to history for changing or fixing something. It's just he represented sort of a classy presentation. His show was one that sort of valued some intellect and some wit. He was really funny, and kind of a biting show host too. I mean, you'd get contestants on where you could see Alex Trebek kind of dig into them a little bit, and I just I'm gonna miss that style. I'm gonna miss that presentation. I'm gonna miss a wit, and we could use more of that. Where it's okay to be clever. It's fine to be smart. Even sometimes, maybe even a little jokingly condescending. Um, I'm really gonna miss Alex Trebek, and I hope he is now at peace. I hope he wasn't too uncomfortable in his final days, and I hope he had those opportunities to spend time with his family, his friends, his loved ones. So we're I don't even know what this means for a show like Jeopardy. You know, it's just been a staple of our television viewing. I it's just weird. It's a really weird time. It's been such an institution of television. I can't imagine what it's going to be like if it's even just the little bit different of having a different host. So it's weird stuff. And yet another sort of oddity in the year 2020 where we'll have to face and confront some kind of change from something that we were very familiar with. But I'll always have incredibly fond memories of Alex Trebek as the host of Jeopardy. And Dave Burns, Jeopardy is one of the most important TV shows in the history of America. It's like Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and Jeopardy. I know it's so weird how my feelings are latched on to this game show. But it's just always been there. It's been this bedrock of television. It's been this cultural institution, whatever grandiose words we want to use to describe it. And when it changes, it'll be unfamiliar, and as I've said about other things, unfamiliarity makes us feel very anxious. So I wanted to spend a little time at the top of this show just in remembrance, and maybe I'll fire up some old recordings, on our DVR just to binge some classic Jeopardy. And Simon says, Hypno, one of the sad things about getting older is losing the entertainment fixtures in our lives, people we never knew but grew up with. Again, it's so silly to be as hung up about this stuff, but it's like television has that impact. I mean, Alex Trebek has been in my living room my entire life. So I don't know what my living room will look like next. All right. Let's move on. I am gonna cover some housekeeping, but we're gonna try and keep this quick. I have a lot. There was so much, and because I didn't do housekeeping last week with TK, because I wanted to jump right into TK chat. Let's try and fly through this. I don't know what the over under is. It's 9:09 on the West Coast here. So let's knock out some housekeeping. All right. First off, I was hoping this article would get a little bit more traction, but I did a buy the benchmarks on the Galaxy Note 20 while TK and I were doing our phone exchange. And I don't think I'm going to do these as videos anymore. I think it makes more sense to write up, show the bar graphs, and turn it into more of a text piece and an editorial. But considering the price of the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, I found some very interesting results in trying to push it hard for real-world tests. And as always, this is another call. If there are other real-world tests you'd like to see me benchmark with, drop some comments, drop some suggestions. It's just running a synthetic benchmark and then trying to look at some gaming performance is insufficient to really test the performance of a pocket computer. Right after that, I did a quick comparison, LG Wing versus the V60. Are you into folding or swiveling? and we can talk about what the differences are between these two premium LGs. And it's funny. It's, there are definitely some pros and cons, compromises from the wing, higher price tag to enable this radical manufacturing. But it's really interesting to me how those two phones really do approach very different consumers, even though they share quite a bit of DNA. Moving on. My first look at the OnePlus 8T, where really there was one little thing about the 8T that makes me very, very happy. And yeah, I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Moving right along. I also had to write another Galaxy Note 20 Ultra editorial where I kind of feel like a lot of the ennui or the we've seen a handful of those articles where, oh, the Note 20 is like so expensive and it's not doing enough. It's not really wowing me. And I feel like now is the right time to course correct on what the Note 20 really is and how it's been missold to consumers almost its entire existence. And now we've got tech nerds acting like it's not enough. It's the like most Note-like phone and the most powerful phone Samsung's ever made, but that's not good enough for me. I need to be wowed. Well, I kind of feel like we're missing the point. So I wrote an editorial about that too. And it's quite a bit. I know. So I'm seeing people in here like Civilization 6 and Fortnite benchmarks, Morrowind on mobile benchmarks. Yes, there are gaming benchmarks that we can perform. Can you reliably track gaming performance with the current tools that are broken, where a lot of these game testing apps and platforms don't work consistently across Android 11, getting your frames per second, any of your performance dips? And then also, what does that actually entail? Like, if I'm showing a 3% difference in frames per second from phone to phone to phone, is that really comprehensive performance testing? And can I reliably show that? So I appreciate, I can show you like Doom 3. Yeah, Doom 3 has a frames per second counter, and on phones with Snapdragon 855s, it's pegged at 60 frames per second. So is there anything I can show moving from an 855 to an 865? Not really. So we need to find other taxing situations. Like if I do a huge RAR compression, I can show substantial differences, or at least I should say significant differences in performance between different phones, even phones on the same chipset. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Who was it? Someone on the Discord, oh no, was helping me try to come up with a Lightroom test where I run like 100 raw files through O'Shea. O'Shea was trying to help on a Lightroom test, so we could do something like that. Again, I don't want it to be dependent on an internet connection. So just opening social media apps shows you nothing, because that's really more a test of RAM, and that's really more a test of how fast your internet speed is. But if I dump 3 gigabytes of raw audio into a RAR compression test, I can show you very clearly what some of the differences in performance. O'Shea Davis. Thank you, Aditya Anil. And also, O'Shea is showing off incredible Nokia 9 pics on our Discord. All right, moving right along on the housekeeping. I had our first look at the TCL 10 5G UW, the most wallet-friendly 5G phone on Verizon. We're going to talk about this phone a little bit, too, at the end of this podcast, as it's interesting to put this phone up against a phone like the Nord N10. This is one of the most important videos I've put out, so of course it's not getting a ton of viewing or a ton of traffic. I am very disappointed in how we talk about the different categories of phone. Do you have a flagship phone or a mid-ranger phone? And we don't talk about anything else in these very generic price-based terms. So I shot this video as a way to start trying to course correct on the different types of phones that are out there. So the title is a little generic, which phone is the right fit for you. But the main point I'm trying to get across are there are different hardware configurations for different reasons. And so if you want a folding phone, that's different than if you want a small form factor communicator. Productivity device should come with some other kind of hardware advantage that enables you to get your work done. So instead of trying to say, well, it's really expensive, could $1,000 phone ever be worth it? You look at what does that $1,000 enable you to do. If it's just $1,000 spent on opening Facebook and generically shooting some point and shoot HDR photos, then no. That's how you're using your phone. But if that $1,000 phone enables you to leave a $1,500 camera and a $2,000 laptop at home, then that $1,000 is very well spent for getting your work done out in the field. So I'm really trying to broaden our minds. Lawrence? Raymond, it's saying I have a nice cap on. I absolutely do have a great ball cap on. I need to scroll through just a couple more. We'll wrap up housekeeping here. An editorial on the Pixel 5's naming, where I think we can be a little frustrated with Google for keeping the same naming convention, even though the Pixel 5 is not necessarily a direct replacement for the Pixel 4. And then this morning, I put out my embargo OnePlus Nord N10 video and how this is not a phone for me. And in the clickbaitiness of that title, I'm still really excited that Nord is hitting North America. It's just we need to be specific about who and why we're excited for a new phone like this to enter into the North American market. And of course, if you've been following my channel or you stay subscribed or you smash that bell icon on YouTube, I accidentally broke the embargo on the Nord N10 because the original embargo was for Friday and the follow-up changed it, but there wasn't like a clear announcement on that. So I didn't read the email as closely as I should have, saw the embargo, kind of loosely kept it in my brain, but I'd already put it in my calendar. And when something goes in my calendar, it kind of exits my brain. So if you were one of the 93 people who originally saw that video when it went live on Friday, you got a sneak peek, and that probably impacted my relationship with OnePlus. So that was not a great look for me. Moving right along on the Patreon, we've got the LG Wing audio review. We've got a closer look at the Pixel 5's potential screen gap, something that some folks have been concerned about for build quality. Again, in terms of talking about $1,000 phones, the folks at Newegg wanted me to do a quick roundup on some tips and tricks for shopping a new phone. And then I also put out a Wing camera review. Now, this isn't one of my full deep dive reviews. This is more of an addendum because performance, we've got a phone in the Wing that's sort of splitting the difference between a V60 and a Velvet, and camera performance is going to lean one way or the other. So if the camera performance is more like the V60, then if you watch my V60 camera review, you're going to get a very clear sense of what that sensor can do. And then we just want to talk about some of the differences between the V60 or the Velvet and the Wing. And then lastly, it's not really a multimedia consumption device, but I wanted to take a closer listen to the Surface Duo, that mono speaker, and some of the audio kit. We already know that the headphone dongle on the Duo is pretty not great. So, if you really, really want to get a sense of what the Duo can do for entertainment and for multimedia and for audio, I've got the audio deep dive on that too. Because it's not great. Right. So all of the stories we're going to be talking about this week, all of the housekeeping, all of the things that I've produced over the last couple of weeks that we just caught up with in that housekeeping, you can find all of it on SomeGadgetGuy.com, the show notes for this episode, and just kind of keeping pace because I know we're through Techtober, but I'm still scrambling to try and wrap up videos on the OnePlus 8T, the Pixel 5, a proper Wing review. There's just so much going on, and I want to still fulfill some of these longer-term conversations on phones like the Surface Duo, and I kind of want to go back to the Xperia 1 Mark II and the OnePlus 8 Pro before we wrap up the year. So I kind of feel like some of this conversation got away from us. I feel like some of the knee jerk, you look at a OnePlus 8 Pro, and at the beginning of the year, it was all about, oh, this phone's too expensive. OnePlus made $1,000 phone. And I keep coming back to the OnePlus 8 Pro. I shot my daughter's Halloween photos on the camera on the OnePlus 8 Pro. And there's something I think people are missing out on if they're only just playing the YouTube SEO embargo week game. I don't know, man. It's heady stuff, and I've got to try and find time to cram all of this content into my workflow. I'm already kind of at my limit for making all kinds of stuff. So why don't we shift gears here? Oh, Simon says Hypno, that was a fantastic video. I'm assuming you were talking about the wing. But oh, and a detail, no, I missed a few SGG write-ups and Patreon videos. I need to catch up on those. Without me sort of constantly harassing you on Twitter to check out my stuff, it's I make a lot of stuff. It's a lot. Nick Fell with a highlighted message. Any iPhone coverage coming? I feel like the Mini is unique enough to care about. That form factor with the flagship spec sheet is making me consider it, despite being an Android diehard. The iPhone Mini is, in terms of being a daily driver phone, is the phone I'm most interested in. Just like last year, the Galaxy S10e was the phone from Samsung I was most interested in. It's been tempered a little by rocking the iPhone SE. Things like having Touch ID back makes me really cranky when I go to a face scanning solution again, and just how immediate and how reactive the iPhone SE is. I'm not sure I'm gonna feel like the 12 mini is really gonna give me twice as much phone. Oh, well, I guess it's not twice as much phone, but like, is it really going to give me 70% or 60% more phone for that price tag hike? And the thing that's really bothering me is Apple's frustrating division of features and support for their various lines of phone this year. If I want to, kind of take Apple at their word and talk about Apple at the bleeding edge, well, that's the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Okay, that's an $1,100 phone. If I want to talk about the phone I'm most interested in, that's the iPhone 12 mini. But then I miss out on that camera conversation, because that supposedly matters now that it's an iPhone, that there's one version of the iPhone that has an improved camera sensor. And we also have to balance that against like a Pixel 5. If you want that small form factor phone feel, the Pixel 5 is a phenomenal Android solution for that kind of communicator use. And for whatever reason, we complain about Google in hardware, but then we don't complain about Apple in hardware. So I'm really torn. I want to cover some iPhones. I'm looking maybe early next year, because I'm so swamped with everything else, and Apple videos only do okay for that SEO bump that talking about Apple and Samsung generate on YouTube channels. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort, and it's the most expensive devices to cover for my channel, and I don't really pay that off, right? It's always a deficit for me working Apple and Samsung coverage really, really hard, unless I want to turn my channel into nothing but Apple and Samsung commentary. If every video I make is Apple v Samsung, then YouTube will make my videos more accessible to people, and I don't really want to lean into that. I like talking about other things instead. And Aditya Anil is telling me to stretch. Let me stretch. But yeah, I'm going to have a lot to say about the Pixel 5 in sort of the comparison of what Google and Apple are doing, because I feel at a $200 price difference between the iPhone 12 Pro and the Pixel 5, what you would want in a smaller form factor phone, Apple is not worth it. I really feel like the 12 Pro is a no buy. Like, really, like, take it off the list of consideration. If you want the Pro features, you need to step up to the 12 Pro Max. And then everything else that's covered by the 12 and the 12 mini at least helps you save a little bit of cash over the 12 Pro. The 12 Pro to me just looks like a pain point phone. And it's very frustrating because it's the smaller phones I tend to prefer, especially when talking about iPhones. I still think iOS is best served on a smaller screen. It's very frustrating, I think, looking at Apple's lineup this year. And to top it all off, I've been ridiculously happy with my iPhone SE. So even for having a little bit more power and a slightly larger battery that's completely nuked by 5G radios, there's very little about the iPhone 12s that really excites me. And the thing that does is seeing a larger sensor on an iPhone, and the only phone that has it is the 12 Pro Max. All right, Vazicos 8's telling me to drink more water. Let's do that too. All right. Matt Tyler, if Juan goes Apple versus Samsung all the time, we're out. No, but I'm serious. It's not. Yeah, it's been the most interesting part of the conversation of 2020, and what we're going to be talking about in the gadget block are phones that are wonderful daily drivers. You do not satisfy that anymore at $900 plus. Getting your stuff done, if you're using your phone for smartphone things and you're not trying to push the limits on replacing a laptop or, content creation or heavy productivity, $400, $400, and it's real good. The landscape now, even in North America, where we're starved for a lot of those competing brands like Realme or Xiaomi or these other sort of competitive lower cost parts bin manufacturers. I mean, from the Pixel 3a to now, this segment is exploding, and I really want more consumers to understand they don't have to spend premium tier prices just to get a daily driver functional phone with a decent camera and a good screen and good battery life. Like, that's so easy now. My dad, he's actually, I was showing him phones. He came out to visit for Lex's birthday. I think he's going to go Pixel 4a. This is the guy that's always like, well, I need to have a nicer phone and I want to have this and I need to have that. I put both the Pixel 5 and the 4a in his hands and he's like, no, this is fine. Like, he's gonna go from always shopping the top of the line Pixel, or I think currently he's on a Galaxy S9, and you're like, no, I'm good. I just want a smaller phone. Oh, this has a headphone jack. Cool. He's not swayed by like 5G, nicer, more premium build materials. My wife is probably gonna drop her LG for a Pixel too, a Pixel also. So it's funny stuff. I mean, this enthusiast conversation is really lopsided right now. But I want to knock out some news. I was doing really good on housekeeping. I got housekeeping done in like 11 minutes. And then I got sidetracked. From McCorcoran 3, LG had a great 2020, but the Pixel 4a is phone of the year for me. I'm going to have a real hard time not declaring the Pixel 4a sort of the consumer winner, especially as a communicator. When people say they're just, I do some email and text messaging and I keep up with my friends and I social media, it's really hard. It's really hard picking another phone that handles all of that stuff just as well and at a competitive price. It's just, man. Yeah. So anyway, Matt Tyler, I wish you guys had access to the Poco phone. Seriously, they're so good. The X3 is 199 pounds. It's ridiculous. Patron review incoming. Oh, excellent. So Matt Tyler is going to write up his experiences on the Poco. And so I'll make sure that gets highlighted on the Patreon. Again, we've had a few folks write up some really great experiences using phones over on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. So the big news story this week, getting into the news, and Juan's still going to be sidetracky and rambly this whole podcast, I feel. It's already 9:30. We're going to have to move through the news block because I want to spend some time talking about phones, and I can't run too long today. I don't know if anyone caught last week, there was like this election thing, and I don't want to get too hung up on the individual results, the hilarity of the Trump campaign's press conference at a Four Seasons. Please look that up, because if that had happened in an episode of Veep, I would have thought, oh, that's a bit silly and that's a little too over the top. I don't think that's real. I mean, like, that's not real politics. Oh no, stuff like that happened in the most visible and public way possible for a presidential campaign to really stumble in a hilarious way. But we're a tech politics podcast, and one of the things that I think is going to be really important to follow up on, because we've really got to ask ourselves, why is it that certain public figures get special protections or are able to post in different ways on social media? So, coming in January, when President Trump is no longer the head of state, is no longer the figurehead in our executive branch, he will no longer enjoy special public interest protections in January. This is written up by Adi Robertson over on The Verge. President Donald Trump will lose Twitter privileges he enjoys as a world leader when President-elect Joe Biden takes office on January 20th, 2021. Twitter confirmed that Trump's @RealDonaldTrump account will be subject to the same rules as any other user, including bans on inciting violence and posting false information about voting or the coronavirus pandemic. Twitter emphasizes that world leaders can still be subject to enforcement if they promote terrorism, make direct threats of violence against an individual, post private information like someone's home address, post intimate photos or videos without the subject's consent, engage in behavior related to exploitation, or encourage self-harm. These rules apply regardless of a tweet's public interest value. This is the quote from Twitter relayed to The Verge. Twitter's approach to world leaders, candidates, and public officials is based on the principle that people should be able to choose to see what their leaders are saying with clear context. This means that we may apply warnings and labels and limit engagement to certain tweets. This policy framework applies to current world leaders and candidates for office, and not private citizens when they no longer hold these positions. I don't know that I understand why elected officials, heads of state, public figures of some notable interest receive this kind of special protection on social media. I really don't think this is a benefit for public discourse. If we have public figures or elected officials spreading conspiracy theories or spreading misinformation, you can put a little warning label on that, but it's still an enormous audience. And in this entire year, we started out this year, remember, with people setting fire to 5G towers because of terrible conspiracy theories, and an active campaign of spreading misinformation. Again, you want to destabilize a population, convince the citizens of that area to destroy their own telecommunications equipment. To me, that sounds, if I'm putting my tinfoil hat on, that sounds like a state organized run sort of chaos mission from outside actors to support that kind of consumer misinformation. So I'm really not sure. I'm really trying to rack my brain. And please, someone in the comments, if there's some other public benefit that maybe I'm missing, because it's not even a situation like, oh, well, that means we've got Trump on the record. Twitter is not the record, and Twitter is way too easily manipulated for making it the sort of new newspaper of the 21st century, right? Like, that doesn't work. I don't buy into that line of thinking. Social media is fluid and disposable, not the resource we're going to use to archive speech for the coming generations. So if anything, especially as we see more government interest in how we regulate social media, as we examine how we're going to change, we need to change Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. One of the things that I'd love to kind of chip away at the idea is speech from a politician is not any more special than speech from a citizen. I really don't see where they should get special protections. The only thing that makes sense in my brain is if you've got a politician that's saying outlandish things, that creates outrage. Outrage improves interactions on the platform and keeps people on the site longer. Facebook is an outrage machine, and that's what keeps people invested in using Facebook more aggressively. And I would have to imagine that the same is true for Twitter. Fat Produce with a highlighted comment. If they had banned Trump before he became president, then they wouldn't have found their hands tied since public policy was being disseminated on their platform when he became president. Matt Tyler asks a question which kind of leads into that too, Andrew. Doesn't the White House have its own Twitter to remain separate from the current president? And Nick Fell, separate. There is an official POTUS Twitter account, and that will be handed over to the Biden administration in 2021. And this is what's kind of tricky. Let's say real Donald Trump had been banned on Twitter. As soon as Trump became president, he would have just had the POTUS Twitter account at his disposal. So whether or not that would have affected results or the outcome of the election, I mean, it's really difficult to kind of untangle all those what ifs from 4 years ago. But suffice it to say, Donald Trump still would have had a protected platform, even if his personal account had been suspended. So we'll have to see. Now, as a former president, isn't he still a political figure of note, right? We have this reverence for previous presidents. It's only really been Obama that's been in any way digitally social media savvy and has kept up with the conversation on social media platforms. So would former President Obama be considered a notable figurehead with special protections on Twitter, or is he just a regular citizen like everyone else? This is the major problem I have with this policy on Twitter, is how unfairly it's really being applied. And at some point, we've got to say, an elected official is a citizen of the United States is not special. They are not a protected class of citizen. They are a citizen that reports to their constituents. They are employees of the citizens of the United States of America. We need to know what they're doing. We need to know what they're working on. But that, to me, does not afford them special speech protections over the rest of the country. And actually, from Punch Kun, that's a good point. If they had managed to shut Donald up, I honestly think he would have done much better overall. Not only leading up to the 2016 election, because it would have fed into the liberal bias of the lamestream media, but then also he wouldn't have seemed as unreasonable if we weren't watching his Twitter meltdowns play out on the regular. All right, I want to change subject. So the primary point of that last story is we've got to keep an eye on Twitter, just like I've been ranting and railing about Facebook. It's keeping up with a focus on social media, the detrimental aspects of social media, how this like feedback loop of stimulus and response kind of infects conversations, it infects speech, and it kind of leads us to a more toxic, confrontational examination or conversation. Think of all of the family relationships that have been impacted and affected by social media over the last several years. Family members, I just know I can't have a reasonable conversation with these days because of this glut of manufactured outrage. Moving forward, and this is why I feel it's critical, our next presidential administration whatever happens in the Senate, and whatever happens in the House, we've got to get a lot savvier about our social media strategy. Liberal or conservative, I just mean as people, we need to work harder at media literacy. We need to work harder at explaining what happens when you log into Facebook and how Facebook tries to manipulate your behavior. We need to spell out our concerns for things like Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, broadband infrastructure for more rural areas, net neutrality, right to repair. There are so many tech topics we've got to stay on top of and see if we can't start instituting some positive change to help create a healthier landscape of competition. Because ultimately, that's going to be, I feel, what improves the real world on the ground experience for consumers out there. DT Anil, yes, more media literacy, please. And also media literacy for the older segments of our population, because I get into regular conversations with kids. I mean, I'm on YouTube, so I'm talking to people across the gamut, and my audience does skew a little older, but younger people don't seem to have these issues. Sort of sussing out, oh, well, yeah, I got this link off of Facebook. Probably BS. It's like, it's my great aunt that I'm really worried about when she starts sharing memes. She doesn't realize that, like, oh, that's fascist propaganda, but you caught the surface level message there. So yeah. Matt Tyler Juan just called us old. I'm right there, man. I'm not young. I'm no spring chicken. But this is one of those generational aspects where I feel way better about the generations coming after me being a bit savvier. If I go to someone and I say, like, yeah, Facebook is doing this to manipulate your behavior, yeah, duh. But if I go to older people, they'll say, oh, but I'm above all that, and advertising doesn't work on me. I could really go for a tasty soft drink right now. Like, it's a terrible joke from the IT crowd. All right, just a little bit of happier news, and we can blitz through the rest of this news block. Coming by way of Engadget, written up by Daniel Cooper, the world's first crewed Hyperloop trip was a success. So the Virgin Group, Virgin Hyperloop, kicked off a crewed, not crude as in crude oil, but a crewed as in it had human beings on board. I realize with my dental trays in, it's really hard for me to say certain words with the proper emphasis. So they put people into a big old container and shoved them in a tube, and then they launched that tube at 107 miles an hour. And it worked. I don't know. I'm just kind of tickled. I don't know that Hyperloop really has the practical benefits. Like when we break down how Hyperloop functions and what it's going to mean for moving things in tubes under the ground or above the ground, as opposed to like traditional trains and electric trains and things like that. I'm not sure Hyperloop is it. But there's something I think really fascinating about maybe using a network of Hyperloops as a way to ship goods. Another way to kind of improve our distribution, adding to truck drivers. So our economy, as advanced in 21st century and as global as it is, I mean, think about what went down over this last year of social distancing and how much pressure was placed on truck drivers and delivery drivers. Literally, the humans working in warehouses, to the humans driving trucks, to the humans sorting mail, to the humans dropping it off on your doorstep. Anything we can do to improve that infrastructure is going to be huge for our economy and for commerce and for jobs. And there's something in my brain that's really tickling in my brain where if we can supplement some of that moving of goods around by making a series of tubes, then Hyperloop to me becomes really exciting. But not in the idea that I'm going to jump into one and strap myself in and get launched at 300 miles an hour and just hope it works. I hope there's no vacuum decompression. From Punchkun, as far as as fast as it goes, the number of Hyperloop lanes you would need to get meaningful people capacity seems prohibitively expensive and complicated. And Nick Fell, Hyperloop needs to be substantially faster than high-speed rail to justify its existence. So that's where I'm not sold on Hyperloop for people. But to me, there's just this idea where Hyperloop as a supplement to trains and trucks, just another method of moving things around, that starts to make a bit more, I like something groks there that makes this a bit more feasible than Hyperloops are going to start competing against airplanes for commuter travel. I don't know. I don't feel that, but I do feel like there's still something valuable about this method of shooting something through a tube and hoping it comes out okay on the other side. Oh, Punch Kun. Yeah. Cargo containers from a port to a major city Hyperloop would be amazing. Okay, so yeah, again, just some kind of feel there. Again, it's so raw in my brain, but we put people in a tube and they ran it at 100 miles an hour. It's progress. That makes me happy. What's not progress is a whole series of websites that will be inaccessible to older Android phones sometime next year. This is coming by way of Android Police. Again, something to keep an eye on. We've got family and friends out there who are using crazy old phones. Android has gotten way better as a general platform. I mean, just from Android 8 to now, the improvements are much more tangible in how phones are getting supported, updated. A number of manufacturers taking pledges to support for longer periods of time. 3 years is now kind of the norm. It's not the exception like it used to be. Like OnePlus doesn't stand alone as the only phone company supporting older phones. So this is very concerning just for how the internet works. Many websites will stop working on older Android versions in 2021, written up by Corbin Davenport over at Android Police. It took a long time, but most of the web now uses HTTPS to securely transmit information, partially thanks to a push by Google. However, this does mean that many websites could encounter issues or fail to load entirely if the proper certificates aren't installed on your device, which is exactly what will happen to older Android devices next year. Let's Encrypt is one of the world's leading certificate authorities, and the group's certificates are used by approximately 30% of all web domains. So, if phones, let me just kind of break down the rest of this here real quick. Phones prior to Android 7.1.1 are going to fall out of the certificate agreement. And basically, roughly 30%, maybe even a little bit more of all of the websites and web services that rely on this HTTPS security certificate are going to stop working properly on older Android devices. Again, we want to think like, oh, well, those are phones from like 2016 and 2017. That's plenty of time as 2021. That's like 4 or 5 years. There are a ton of older Android devices still in circulation. So consumers are going to start getting hit by incompatibilities with web traffic, incompatibilities with network operation. 3G services are going to start getting reworked so that spectrum and that air is going to new 5G deployment. Voice over LTE is going to start wrecking older LTE devices on networks that are looking to move their voice signal over to more of a data style connection. We're going to see a bunch of consumers left out in the cold over the next 2 years, and it's going to be a rough transition. So we've got to keep our eyes and also just like look around. The next time you get to visit some family, like who's still on a Galaxy S4? Like that's that's still a thing. I've got a collection, a museum of old phones, and literally any of them, I could put a SIM card in most of them, and they're gonna be fine daily drivers, even without all of the latest and greatest current software from Google. Um, that's going to start breaking over the next 2 years. And so we've got to be those resources. We got to be ready to help folks out. And especially like how we started some of this conversation talking about like Pixels and OnePlus Nords and TCLs. We got to have a pretty comprehensive understanding of some of those lower cost solutions too. Someone who's holding on to a Galaxy S4 or a Galaxy S5 probably doesn't want to spend $1,500 on a phone. So we got to make sure they don't just look at another Galaxy S Ultra. Well, that's the phone for me. I have the Galaxy S5. you point them towards the FE and lower. Oh, I'm sorry. Nick Fell had a great follow up to the Hyperloop and highlighted the comment and everything. Yeah, sorry, man. I did kind of move abruptly off of the Hyperloop, but that was a great point. Said the idea of a Hyperloop can hit substantially higher speeds than even the fastest tested yet. An express between Atlanta, New York, LA, and Seattle that completes cross-country trips in just an hour or two would be groundbreaking. Again, I just think right in there. And then you can offload some of that. Truckers are going to have new distribution points throughout the country. They're going to be moving goods more efficiently. I think it's just better business. Matt Tyler, your Note 4, you use that regularly. Won't that be affected? It absolutely will. I mean, again, it'll just kind of further move my Note 4 into the supplemental position of just being like my teleprompter. It's perfect for that. I'm going to keep using that Note 4 until it finally completely dies. But the Note 4 was one of those, like, I love going back to the Note 4 to show how, yes, we've improved. Phones have gotten way better and way more powerful since the Note 4, but not as much as people really think. It's not like some revolutionary difference in how you use apps and services. From the Note 4 on, we've got 4K video, we've got great build quality. You know, you can increase the storage and pop in a memory card, and I can still throw in a SIM card today. And that Note 4, it's still a usable pocket computer, and that blows my mind. All right, anyway. All right, moving right along. I'm only teasing the story. I'm not going to dig too deep into it. And Politico just has kind of a brief write-up here, but we've got to keep our eyes on the FTC. We're going to probably see the FTC. Let me just do the headline here. This is coming from Politico. Oh, I don't know who wrote this. Oh, Leah Nyland. Couldn't say that one. FTC likely to sue Facebook on antitrust violations by end of November, but the agency may keep the case internal, stymieing states that want to team up. That to me is the interesting part of this. Please go check out, when I have the show notes or the link, whatever you want to do, check out the Politico write-up. This is kind of interesting how we're kicking off the Facebook side of these recent antitrust investigations. When it comes to Google is such a large and pervasive aspect of internet traffic. Search, such a big deal. It made a lot of sense that it wasn't really just one singular antitrust investigation. We're seeing separate investigations from the EU. More than half the states in the... Actually, I think one of the only... Like Georgia might be the only state. Or is it Arkansas? I can't remember now. But most of the United States is also... going to be hammering Google in these joint antitrust investigations and lawsuits. We're going to be seeing the federal government also getting involved in its own way. I think it would be I find it very curious that the FTC might decide to try and go it alone, as opposed to empowering support and building more of a coalition of states, attorneys general, and various other lawmakers to go after Facebook. It's either that they've got a really, really great case, or we might just be seeing some more political theater. Oh, yeah, we totally went after Facebook. Yep, gave him a good old slap on the wrist. So I just want us to watch. I'll be bringing it up in future podcasts. Obviously, I want to see what the FTC's case is, but we've got to see what happens here. This is happening at the same time that the FCC is looking at trying to enforce changes to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. We've got a lame duck president in office. He's got a couple months left on his term that I'm sure is going to try and force more executive actions and more executive orders. And then we're going to have to see how this transition happens between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, because I'm sure they've got very different goals for what the telecommunications industry is supposed to look like. It's going to be real messy. These are the first steps that we're taking a look at as our government gets involved right in the middle of a presidential change. That's heady stuff. Our politics is already messy enough. Changing a bunch of the players as we try to get law enforcement and regulatory agencies involved is going to be real good. I'm sure it's going to work out real great for everybody. From a DTNL, how do we actually get Facebook to change their policies? They can't entirely run on a no profit policy. They have employees to pay. Switching to a subscription policy might see a drop in numbers for them. And from Greg38, yeah, it's real heavy. It's real messy. Aditya Anil, that is a very good question. And I don't know what the future of internet commerce looks like. I really don't. I really don't have a good answer for that. But I think the current model of big data is unsustainable. And this is what showcases the problems that we have with Section 230. I am not in favor of getting rid of those protections for communications companies. We need to refine those protections, though, because Facebook gets to act as both a publisher and a distribution source. And really, we need to see some separation there. I also find it very disingenuous to see Facebook trying to talk about consumer privacy and consumer choice while they're purposely entwining all of their services to make it difficult for a service to be split off or sold. I don't see any consumer benefit to having Facebook Messenger and Instagram stapled together. But Facebook's doing that because then it makes it more difficult for another, like a government agency, to come in and say, you've got to split these apart. We're going to do this antitrust thing. We think you're a monopolizing force in this industry, and so now we're going to divest components of your business into separate businesses. Well, we can't. They're they're indelibly linked. They're entwined with each other, and it would be a consumer harm to start separating these services out. That's, to me, what Facebook is banking on. It doesn't make Instagram better. It does not make Instagram better to have a unified messenger kind of forced into a photo sharing service. But it's grown beyond that. And so now it's Facebook trying to make sure that they can't, their data collection policy can't be interrupted by government regulation. From Al's Bockley, I just looked at my Facebook settings the other day after a long time. The thing became more complicated and complex than a decent work software app. It's ridiculous. I had to log in just to manage some of the settings on my SomeGadgetGuy page, and trying to use my personal Facebook page. And in earnest, I think this is the first time I've logged into my personal Facebook account through the facebook.com in a web browser in almost a year. And the changes year over year, it is unmanageable. Like, there is so much change to settings, to layout, to sharing, where my friends list lives, being able to find information that I'm trying to look for. It's awful. It is so bad. I can't handle. I mean, it's like every time I peek in Facebook's direction, it really reinforces I cannot use this. It's not good. It is not good software. It is only designed to be confusing and outraging so that you live in it longer. Facebook is a blight on, on the industry of social commentary and discussion and the original mission of keeping people connected. It is so far removed from that now. Words fail to express my disappointment. All right. One last quick story, and this one's really sad if you like your ears. Oh, I don't have my Discord up, but it came by way of the Discord, the Some Gadget Guy Discord. And I remembered seeing this story. I did not follow up on it. So those of you who helped submit it, it's oh, TK Bay's in the chat. Hey, what's up, TK? But yes, this one's going to be tricky. I'm not entirely sure what the correction is going to be for this market issue. So, this is coming by way of ProSound News, by the way, ProSoundNetwork.com. AKM factory fire, a pro audio industry disaster. Written up by Clive Young. An 82-hour fire in AKM semiconductor factory is already hurting numerous top pro audio manufacturers around the globe. In the wake of a massive 3-day fire at the Nobeoka City factory of semiconductor producer Asahi Kasei Microsystems. I know AKM. I had no idea that's what AKM stood for. Manufacturers around the globe are now facing anticipated shortages of crucial DAC and ADC chips used in their products. It's probably the most disruptive event in my 40 years of audio industry experience, said John Legrau, CEO of Millennia Media. Devastating is not too strong of a word. Can 2020 get any worse? Millennia is just one of many high-end pro audio companies with major products designed around AKM chips. Others include Solid State Logic, Tascam, Mini DSP, Merging Technologies, SPL of Germany, and RME, to name only a few. This is already hitting hard. I want to find... Okay, here. This is coming from Millennia's John Legrau. Every AKM part we use, ADCs, DACs, ASRCs, and receivers, is made exclusively in the Nobeoka plant. Of course, all AKM audio parts immediately disappeared from frontline distributors such as DigiKey and Mouser, and now the aftermarket brokers are selling AKM parts at horrific markups. We saw one $5 AKM part being offered at $110 each. So that's gonna be rough. What I'm not entirely sure of is the consumery side probably won't be hit too immediately. Like, there's still some components out there in manufacturing. And then we'll hopefully see some other audio manufacturers step up. So I mean, people in the live chat are already talking about like other component manufacturers like Sabre, ESS. So there's some potential for other manufacturers to fill some of this need, but so much of this manufacturing is hinged on one company that it's going to take a long time for that to fully recover, and it's going to have pretty far-reaching impact on, especially once you start moving prosumer and up. I think that's also going to be one of the things. Like when we start talking about microphone pre's, that's not something your average consumer, daily driver, laptop, smartphone user is going to be overwhelmingly concerned about. But DACs and ADCs and all of those individual components that we've just sort of taken for granted and relied on, that's going to be rough. And it's sad because audio doesn't get the mind share in the conversation that it really should. So yeah, it's a bummer. Or some hard words about things like healthcare and having a bit of an emergency supply in the supply chain. Um, oh, and some other people saying like, oh yeah, well LG was already getting rid of the quad DAC, and well, yeah, kind of. The again, when we're talking about mobile components and computers, like that conversation's the conversation is frustrating because so many other manufacturers have already gotten rid of headphone jacks, but that doesn't mean they got rid of audio processing hardware. Does it come from the chipset? Is there some other component that's responsible for that? Is it a USB DAC or dongle? All of this stuff is going to start getting hit because if AKM components are being are difficult to acquire, then maybe some of the audio processing units that would have gone into some kind of little USB DAC, maybe it didn't come from AKM. Well, these are going to start getting sourced for other applications. You're not going to let like TV manufacturers go without audio components. So if LG's looking at, like, hey, should we make a bunch of these dongles for the wing, or could we maybe repurpose some of that USB audio kit for something like TV audio processing? I know it's not one-to-one. It's not directly like, oh, we're going to cut open these dongles so we can make more TVs. We're LG. It doesn't work like that. But again, the industry's going to have to shift and manage a major fallout from one very important component manufacturer. But yes, I agree with Matt Tyler. If LG's smart, whatever follows the V60 will maintain that as a feature. I would hope. But again, the industry is going to move on. I feel like even if the next V series, whatever it's going to be called, it still has one, it'll probably end up being the last or one of the last LGs to have this premium audio hardware. Matt Tyler, TVs with no audio is next. Upsell those sound bars and subs. I mean, the funny thing is, like, you still need the audio processing hardware in the sound bars. So even like everything in the living room and in your bedroom and around your computer and your TVs and probably even your car stereos, everything is gonna feel some kind of tweak from this. From Alice Bockley, the V70 is called the Rainbow. The code name is Rainbow. I seriously doubt the V series replacement will be commercially called the Rainbow. All right, let's turn real quick. That was all the news block, and it took me a little longer to get through news and housekeeping and everything that I wanted it to. But we still got to plug the subreddit. We didn't talk about the subreddit last week. Not seriously. I think I tagged it on to the very, very end. But every podcast has a subreddit, and mine is no exception. But my subreddit is focused on trying to create a real grassroots community for folks to help share content they think deserves more attention. So it's great. I mean, we've got the occasional post from YouTubers with millions of subscribers. But the core of this is to find those other conversations that the YouTube algorithm likes to sit on and doesn't really help promote and doesn't really help find new audience. So if you go to reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles, you're going to see a real group of people that are trying to broaden this tech conversation, share more and different voices. It's a little more global with some great conversation happening out of the EU and India. It's really, I mean, I learn a lot, and I found numerous new content creators that I really enjoy their content that I never would have found if I had only followed YouTube's recommendations. Reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. One more time. Reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. And these are the top stories of the last week. And Matt Tyler, looks like I'm leading my subreddit. Woo woo! I made this subreddit, but it's not a me subreddit. This is not a Reddit about me. This is a Reddit about sharing and promoting work. So it's not a foregone conclusion that I take the top spot. In fact, very often I'm maybe not even in the top 5. But my Pixel 5 editorial, what's in a name? The Pixel 5 is not an upgrade over the Pixel 4, ? Is leading. It's the number 1 of the last week. Huzzah! Oh, and everyone say hey to Tech Lovin' Mama. She's late to the show, but she's showing up now, and she definitely deserves a wave. All right, number 2. This is a great video, by the way. Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2 5G versus Microsoft Surface Duo. Best for your productivity needs, coming from hashtag TKMyBay. And then number 3. Oh, I need to upvote this. Galaxy S10 late 2020 review. Is it better than a 2020 budget phone? Rounding out the top 5, we've got a 72-hour look at the iPhone 12 Pro. We've got mobile tech review showing off the Dell XPS 13. We've got the Friday checkout from TechAltar, checking out the Exynos in 2021. Some positive words for Samsung's component and chip fabrication. Easy Computer Solutions, looking at the new mobile G5 camera. We've got MeDo unboxing, Redmi 9 versus Redmi Note 9. Redmi 9 versus Redmi Note 9 Pro. 2 phones under $300. And then Peachy, technically speaking, we've got... Oh, whoops, I didn't mean to click on that. Hold on, let me go back to the subreddit. Peachy checking out the iPhone 12 Pro versus the Google Pixel 5. A fun little camera comparison there. We've got commentary on the mobile market, T-Mobile versus AT&T. We've got... we got a funny little video that someone shared about someone shopping an iPhone 12. It's a cute little animation about how Apple is totally lying about caring about the environment. We've got Chris Panton looking at something to significantly improve your headphone audio playback, Poco X3, Dish Network, Pixel 5 versus iPhone 12, a look back at the BlackBerry Z30, Galaxy S20 FE review coming from GadgetGuy, and closing out the top stories of the last week on the subreddit, Erica Griffin coming back in force to look at the Note 20 Ultra review. Parenthetical, yes, it's worth it. It's a huge collection. I very much enjoy the community and the collection of topics and the videos and the editorials. It's not just YouTube. It's if you're writing about tech stuff, share it. If you're shooting video or vlogging or live streaming or podcasting, Benefit of the Doubt is a regular on the R Glowing Rectangles subreddit. It's really encouraging. It is frustrating and disheartening to keep doing business with Google and YouTube, knowing that unless you only feed them the most trending topic, popular content, that your stuff is probably going to get buried. They manipulate their algorithm, just like Facebook, to try and force an engagement, which isn't really real. And so we've got to kind of make our own. We've got to kind of make our own platform for sharing and building, helping someone grow a channel. You know, it's not just, do you tweet out enough? It's, can we use other systems to help popularize content that we think has some value? Because if we don't actually put some effort behind it, then we're going to get stuck with a very narrow view echo chamber of tech commentary. We're already kind of there, right? You subscribe to someone's channel and they've got 1,000 subscribers, and YouTube is going to shove a really popular channel under your nose. And then if you populate your YouTube account with those types of channels, then you kind of just get the same videos over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So we can do better. Reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. We're growing every week. We're over 1,300 followers already. We're getting tons of great submissions every day. We desperately need your upvotes. Always nice to have more comments, more conversation, more chatter, and then sharing. Sharing is critical. I know some people don't like to spam their personal social media accounts, but if you're not helping to spread the word on this kind of content, it goes away. People stop making it. So this is really, if you're a fan of this kind of stuff, it behooves you to be an active participant. And I know, especially if you're watching this live stream, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but in order for us to go out and spread the good word, we also need to be those kinds of tech evangelists. One more time, reddit.com/r/glowing rectangles. I hope you're there already, but if you're not, I hope you'll check it out. So It's going to wrap us up for the subreddit. I need to take a drink of water here. DTO, no, I had a mild infarction typing that out. He left a really snarky comment there in that goofy, sarcastic speech font text. You know, we had to come up with a special method of capitalizing and lowercasing words so that we could explain to people. I mean, we don't have a sarcasm font for the internet, right? We should have a font that's just pure, you know, like if you see this font, it means sarcasm. But because we can't have that, we had to make up this silly, like, alternating capitalization thing. And he typed out a really silly comment, and apparently it broke his brain. Oh, Adichie Anil, where can you pick up one of these snazzy coffee mugs? Well, if you catch SomeGadgetGuy.com and you go to the support page, there's a little merch store where you can catch all of the really cool, delicious coffee mugs. Like this one specifically is the most delicious coffee mug because this is the best connection you can have between you and your content for the coffee mug. So I'm gonna finish this one off, but then I've got to switch to another coffee mug, and that one's all about pickles. So that's the best. And Raymondit, why no caps for sale? I'm actually working on changing up the Mega Pickle logo so that it can live on a cap. I've done a couple test runs. I am not a graphic designer. So when I did the original Mega Pickle logo, you know, it's like a phone screen. This is really tall and skinny, right? Doesn't look good on a hat because it shrinks way down and then it's split on the seam for the cap. So I've got to do something else that's better fit, especially in a more symmetrical way. So I really just need to come up with a standalone design that works for a ball cap. It's like TK's logo here, TK's logo on the hat, this like beautiful shield, and how even a part of it as it runs through. I'm doing this mirror image. As my hands don't work. As it runs through the center of the ball cap, especially as it goes through part of his beard, looks great. Like I love TK's logo. I actually do wear this hat out in public. But it's something I need to work on. And again, I don't have a ton of extra time to do the merch. All right, Gadget Block. A couple things that I want to chat out real quick. Number one, AirPods are a scourge. They are terrible for your ears. They are terrible for the environment. Apple should be ashamed of themselves. There's no real good way to recycle them. You can't repair them. And it's part of their business model that they're easy to lose, so that you have to buy more individual AirPods to get them sort of repaired with your phone. And that this is actually now contributing to safety issues and health issues on public transit, to the point where this is a headline on Engadget that Panasonic has built a special vacuum to rescue AirPods from train tracks. For a company that says they care about the environment, a significant part of the business model of AirPods is Apple knowing you're going to drop and lose them, to the point where other companies are now making special vacuums to recover AirPods. Obviously, true wireless earbuds in general. But let's be honest, the bulk of those sales, especially in high commuter traffic areas, probably going to AirPods. So they made this special vacuum with these little finger sticky things so that it can suck an AirPod onto one of those little tubes, and then they can pick it up off of train tracks, because they're actually seeing a huge rise in the number of incidents, not only of dropped AirPods, but of people doing stupidly dangerous things to try and recover the AirPods that they've dropped. I just like, You know what you never lose when you have cabled earbuds? If one falls out of your ear, it stays connected to your phone. And the cool thing about cabled earbuds is I have saved a number of phones because you're like, yeah, you're going about your day, you're listening to some music, you try and put your phone in your pocket or you're trying to pull it out, you accidentally slip, you drop it. Well, you got a leash. And so, yeah, it kind of yanks my head a bit, but a couple phones have been saved from imminent destruction by having that headphone cable there. And that probably won't work as well when, all phones have to go over USB dongles. A New York MTA worker told the New York Post, "It happens all the time. Just last week, I had to stop a man from going down onto the tracks to get it." Oh, man. Matt Tyler, hey, Jeff. Yes, sir. Have you vacuumed the railway lines yet? What? Really? Apple, man. Apple. Apple don't speak broke. All right. One more here, and then we can get to talking about some phones to wrap up the podcast. Phone Arena. Looking at some metrics and some sales marketing. 2020 was always going to be a weird year, but Samsung has overtaken Apple in the US for the first time since 2017. New market data courtesy. Oh, sorry. This is Phone Arena written up by Joshua Swingle. New market data courtesy of Strategy Analytics reveals that Samsung overtook Apple in the third quarter of 2020 to become the most popular smartphone manufacturer in the US. The last time Samsung took the top spot was in the US was quarter 2 2017. Per the report, Samsung achieved a market share of 33.7% in the US between July and September that was mainly down to strong demand for recent Galaxy A series devices. I've been saying this on the podcast, on other people's podcasts, in a bunch of my videos. The iPhone SE saved Apple's ass at the beginning of 2020. The A series saved Samsung's ass throughout most of 2020. And what pivot did we see Samsung take later in the year? They didn't keep making the Galaxy S20. That phone is actually getting pulled from a number of USA carriers. Galaxy S20 FE. That's the phone that's driving more consumer interest in a Galaxy S series. A51, A71. Those phones are killing it. Every single time you see someone pick up a more expensive premium device, but what does this mean for average consumers? You can turn that YouTube channel off because they've completely lost the plot. Average consumers buy average phones. Period. A51, A71. A71, solid option. And guess what? In this piece of news, guess whose market share is also up year over year? Anyone want to take a guess? In the United States, we know the top two are going to be Samsung and Apple, right? So who do we think saw their numbers improve in the third place? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Anyone? Bueller? Oh, Sam. Sam says HTC. Adichie says Huawei. Simon says Xiaomi. Raymond says Oppo. You all suck. Simon says Hypno and Root Night 5. LG to the rescue. LG is currently climbing up to 15% market share. So Apple dropped to 30% over this fiscal cycle. Samsung up to 33%. This is kind of rare. It's normal in the United States for Apple and Samsung to eat up over 70% of the United States market. In some quarters, they'll hit as high as 80%. They're currently at 63% of the most recent phones sold. They both took a hit. And a few other players helped diversify, with LG climbing up to 15. It used to be, especially last year, Samsung represented over, I mean, or was it over or was it just under half of every Android sold? That's not the case anymore. And we've got a variety of players playing in the entry level and the mid range that are shaking that up significantly. So, demand for something like the Velvet, that is encouraging LG to continue their focus on these more mid range, consumer focused devices. And I don't have any problems with that. I mean, I wish I still had a G9. Don't get me wrong. I would love to have a proper G9 replacement, but they didn't sell. They didn't sell. They sat on store shelves, especially the unlocked versions did not move. Their carrier strategy is now entrenched because LG's customer is the carrier, and then you do business with the carrier to buy an LG phone. But with that relationship, they're stemming some of their losses. They still have a ways to go to improve, but 15% is pretty big for LG these days. Oh, Raymond, it's Sony. So once we start cracking, I'd love to see. I need to pull up the rest of this report to see if there's more data. I wish this were linked better here, but I'd really like to see more data to see what the other players might be, because this is also just an also ran. You know, oh yeah, oh, and LG's up to 15%. You know, whatever. It's like the only headline that matters is Samsung and Apple. Seeing more competition and more players getting in, pretty big deal. And so that's kind of the pivot that I want to take here. Because some other people mentioned TCL. I want to talk about TCL also. The Nord N10 is the big phone that the embargo just went up this morning. This is my Nord N10. So it's a nice phone. It's coming to the United States. This is going to be another 5G offering. I'm powering it up. I had it turned off. Actually, let me make sure my TCL is powered up too. But this is representing these devices. This is the future of 5G. We're going to actually start moving some 5G adoption. 5G isn't going to... Oof. Let's move the phones away from the speakers. Here, let me just... I'm sorry. That just buzzed on my speaker pretty hardcore. Stop it! That's freaking me out. I'm going to turn on airplane mode real quick. Just so that I don't have microphone and speaker distortion going through this podcast. Because, I'm sure, radiation through your brain. It's fine. It's great. But this is actually representing a bit of that trend. I published a Nord N10 video, and I get a ton of international traffic talking about how it's overpriced and you don't get enough and it's not worth it for the monies. And those people who leave comments like that in your region is probably accurate. Here in the United States, not the same. Not what we face here. Since the Pixel 3a, we're still pushing this market to deliver more options for these more price-conscious mid-ranger devices. And I struggle with this because now that we have phones in the $1,000 territory, $1,500 territory, and $2,000 territory, a phone that sells sub $400 is now technically not mid-range. It's closer to the upper tier of entry level, which is why all of these price tier denominations, flagship, mid-ranger, they don't mean anything. Samsung's flagship crown jewel phone is a $2,000 foldable. So putting that up against, a TCL 10 on Verizon that sells for $399, this is not the mid-range of the market anymore. This is the lower quarter of the market for just getting a phone that can operate on a 5G spectrum. And so when we look at how this market plays out, we fundamentally can't seem to grok that in the United States, it is significantly more expensive for manufacturers to play ball with 5G on carriers. I don't know what it is about folks who leave comments on YouTube videos. They refuse to acknowledge that difference in region. The OnePlus 8 was significantly cheaper in India than it was here in the United States. Now, why do you think that might be? Could it be that licensing and supporting 3 different carriers and 3 different 5G implementations with 3 different models of the phone, and one of those versions still won't be compatible with AT&T's 5G, might be part of the problem? And in years past, you could kind of subsidize those costs, keep everything a bit more even between different regions and different countries. And I don't blame OnePlus for not trying this year. Why cut into the profits of phones for India by subsidizing the prices of phones in the United States? Makes no sense. It's more expensive to get 5G into the USA. Just make them pay more. So a Nord N10 being a slightly less nice Nord than the original Nord that went to a bunch of different regions only makes sense that you would see more of those compromises, but that still we end up with a great option for the United States for a 5G capable phone that doesn't hit an absurd price tag. And that's kind of where I'm getting. We won't get better competition in the United States until we start pushing more of these devices out and getting them into people's hands, and then helping them understand that, like, this is really not an overly compromised experience. And if you're being honest about what your needs are, what pros and cons you can live with, then the Nord becomes a really exciting addition to this conversation for the United States. If you live in a place that gets Pocos and Realmes and Xiaomis and Oppos and Blues and Vivos and all of that other stuff, great. We don't get them here. And I'm not going to recommend, my aunts and uncles who are looking for a good budget device go and import phones that aren't properly supported for our carriers. I'm going to say, well, check this out. It's got a 64 megapixel camera, and it's got an ultra wide, and the screen is really sleek and slick, and the refresh rate, I mean, it's just pretty. The animations are pretty. It's a pretty phone. You probably still want to get a case for it because I don't love the plastic feel on these glossy plastic back devices, but it's going to get good battery life. It has a headphone jack. You can put in a memory card. I don't know why is it that poor person phones get features that average daily driver consumers might actually care about. There is such a huge argument to be made where, compared to the OnePlus 8 at the beginning of the year, there are many consumers in the United States that would probably like this better, just as a daily driver companion. If you never told them that there was one that was nicer than the other, they were just 2 different phones and they kind of used them. Well, this one feels a little faster and the screen's a little nicer, but this one I can use headphones and I can put in a memory card and add storage, and the screens are close. I mean, they're decent screens. They're both about the same. And oh, well, this one has the rear fingerprint sensor and I don't have to worry about the curved display making it harder to protect the other phone. I think if you didn't spell out for them the compromises beforehand, this would do just fine. Like, it would be a head-to-head showdown, and they wouldn't even know that they were supposed to think one was better than the other. And then you tell them the price tag, and I think they'd be really tickled with how the N10 and devices in this ilk are very competitive. DTNO, I'd probably go with the N10 rather than the Nord 3.5 millimeter jack for the win. Again, it's just really interesting that we see, I think the Nord represents, I say this in my video, if you caught my N10 video, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but I think the N10 properly represents the course correction for OnePlus. OnePlus is no longer a brand associated with a single phone. And now there's a proper spectrum of devices from the Pro to the main number series to the Nord. And the Nord is actually its own separate label under the label of OnePlus, which is under the umbrella of BBK. So we kind of drill down. In some regions, you're going to get a Nord. In some regions, you're going to get a Nord N10. In some regions, you're going to get a OnePlus 8. In other regions, you can get an 8 Pro. You know, there's now a much clearer delineation of regions and different phones for different consumers. And you wrap all that up with Oppo and the other BBK brands, and OnePlus is no longer the enthusiast, plucky little upstart label, which was all hip and focused on this one idea of price performance. They're now a mature consumer electronics label offering different options and solutions for different shoppers. So to get some of that attention here in the United States feels pretty good. I want more options to recommend to my family and friends. Someone might really like a Pixel 4a, but just want something that's like a little bigger. It has a memory card or different camera modules. I can put this head to head and say there are pros and cons. But if you wanted something like this, there are now more options to fulfill this. And it's going to be like half the price of like the lesser expensive iPhone. It's hard to say that, the crazy incredible power of an A14 Bionic is really gonna matter to someone shopping daily driver interactions, average consumer use. And knowing that they're not getting a terrible camera in the bargain just feels pretty good. From Corcoran 3, Motorola should be a player in the budget and mid-range space because of their battery life. Motorola still is a player. It's frustrating because we go through these trends and we go through these highlights. From, what is it, the Moto G4? I don't know what happened. And it's a company that I haven't kept up with as well as I really wished I'd been able to. But Motorola deserves a ton of credit just for keeping the segment alive during the darkest days of Android mid-rangers. I remember the G4 being like, oh, this feels different. This feels better. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 614 was a waste of a chipset. Like, it wasn't good. But the overall phone experience was passable. I mean, you had to be very specific about the compromises people would make, but if they understood, they ended up with a pretty good experience. And then from the Moto G5 on, they've been beautifully competitive. You don't feel like there's this insane compromise to using a phone. Like some of the Z Plays, the Moto G5, the metal back, that experience was really nice. And getting into some of the more recent, because I don't even know what Moto's lineup really looks like these days, because there are so many different flavors and permutations of very similar devices. But right now, why I'm excited is seeing OnePlus playing in this space. That feels pretty good. And then I'm consistently impressed to that same flavor of conversation. TCL has had a really strong year, and using the TCL 10 5G has also contributed in a really interesting way. This device is not a 10 Pro. The TCL 10 Pro, I think, is a nicer overall built phone. This phone feels a lot more like a 10L, but gets a more powerful chipset to better complement the 5G radio. And they're certified for Verizon, which is the most expensive flavor of 5G in the United States. It's got the UW ultra wideband branding and comes in at $399. So now that we're seeing more of these types of handsets built by a perfectly competent, respectable phone manufacturer, TCL is that ODM that is becoming a new flavor of like an HTC, making all these different consumer electronics. They're known for TVs here in the United States, but they made Alcatels, they made Blackberries, they made Palm phones, now showcasing their own label first and foremost more aggressively. That contributes to a 5G conversation where I can start taking 5G more seriously for more of my family and friends. At the beginning of the year, I didn't have any problems. iPhone SE, $400, $399. That's a great buy, especially if you're in the iOS ecosystem. And it's a little bit of a bummer. Your resale value is going to plummet. on a 4G iPhone. It will not maintain the same resale value once 5G iPhones are out in the market. But, use the phone, run it into the ground. It's great. Pixel 4a, very similar. I am not conflicted about family shopping a Pixel 4a today and using it as a daily driver phone over the next several years. As network improvements continue to dump money into 5G infrastructure and not rolling out better LTE connectivity, that's going to be a transition point. But wrapping up 2020 here in the United States, we're not just focusing on focusing on $600 and higher phones. We now have some sub $500 options that are really good. They start competing really well against Galaxy A71s. There are some arguments to be made here where a phone like the Velvet faces some critical competition. The Velvet's a better phone. The Velvet has stylus support for a real active pen. The Velvet has a better headphone jack. The Velvet has better speakers. The Velvet camera software, I think, in most markets is better, even if the sensor might be more exciting on the Nord N10. LG's camera processing, I just like better. All of those features, and then depending on where you go, you can add on something like a dual screen case and get like a crazy foldable Note competitor, though it's more expensive. I get the price premium, especially for the build quality, the metal frame with the glass back, the wireless charging, the IP68 certification. All of that contributes to a higher price. Makes perfect sense to me. Those things don't matter so much to you. A TCL 10 Pro, a TCL 10 5G, a Nord N10, most of the daily driver computing experience, you just got to put up with a plasticky case, a little less nice camera processing. That's competition. Now, I think we've got it. This is an exciting fight. I like this fight a lot. From McCorcoran 3. Yeah, TCL televisions are practically free during Black Friday month. Yup. It's funny. It's like, wasn't Matt in the UK? Do they even sell TCL TVs, but they just like give them away with other sales? Am I misremembering that? Isn't there some market where like TCL doesn't really even sell their kit, but like you buy a TCL phone and you get like a TCL Bluetooth speaker and TV for free? Oh yeah, so I mean, like, there's McCorcoran's also saying that TCL only promises Android 11, which is a little weak. That's totally weak. But again, I would say if they can keep up with some decent security patches, maybe you're not getting the bestest operating system updates. $399. The TCL 10L often being sold near $200. And you compare that against the experience on something like an LG Stylo 6, and you're like, this is good. This is surprisingly good performance. And, you have to acknowledge that comes with maybe some support compromises, but I'm not crazy conflicted about making that one solution so long as the person I'm offering it to understands the trade-off is this, but the in-the-hand performance, the camera performance, the battery life, that kind of stuff maybe matters more. I don't know. Again, it's up to that consumer to kind of decide whether $200 over the life of two years, or maybe even trying to push it to 3 years, is what matters to them. And also, fair point. Most people don't even care about getting Android 12 eventually. So this weekend, because I rushed, I kind of messed up last week. I rushed so hard to try and finish my Nord N10 video for Friday because that's when I thought the embargo lifted. I didn't have a proper review out for any phones on Friday because that was supposed to be my Nord day. Getting to spend a little bit more time just over the weekend popping my SIM card in and out of some of these mid-ranger and entry-level solutions, it's getting harder and harder to pick out the true quality of life differences between phones around $300 to phones nearer 800. We're talking about a very fine distinction. Camera performance is always one of those things that we take, like, oh, look at these amazing camera samples and let's do a camera head to head. And then you see like the same 3 selfies, right? Oh, well, this one did better when you backlit your subject. Well, why would you take a terrible photo like that with a selfie camera? Okay, but I digress. So, Nord has one of these super megapixel binning sensors. TCL10 has one of these super megapixel binning sensors. And I'm looking at samples on from my Galaxy Note 20. Spoiler alert, I am going to be putting out not the same full camera deep dive, but a pretty in-depth look at the Note 20 Ultra cameras after doing that phone trade with TK. Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, 108 megapixel camera. Not really. It's not. It's a 12 megapixel shooter, and it bins 9 pixels, 9 subpixels to make one larger pixel. Raw files default to 12 megapixels. That's the gig. So you put that up against the 48 megapixel shooters and the 64 megapixel shooters, and it's increasingly difficult to highlight what kind of photo processing, what kind of post-processing, when viewed through the context of uploading a photo like that to Instagram. The Note 20 Ultra doesn't survive that conversation as well. It's finer and finer differences in shadow detail, in color, in highlights, in saturation and vibrance. Samsung still likes to pack on a lot of sharpening that I really don't like in my photos. And OnePlus has always been a little guilty of not having the best camera post-processing. But this year, I kind of like what OnePlus is doing with HDR better than my experiences shooting on Samsung. Super fine. That's not enough for me to say if you're a Samsung diehard, you should leave Samsung and go to OnePlus. But if you were shopping these different devices at different price points, it is increasingly more difficult to look at a Galaxy Note 20 Ultra and say, like, that's the camera performance. Because I don't like what Samsung's doing with that camera. The hardware is incredible. That sensor really is a phenomenal sensor. But for me to get what I want out of it, I've got to shoot full manual. I can't let the phone make too many decisions for me because I think it makes the wrong decisions. So if I look at the silly, oversaturated, overvibranced, oversharpened images that I might get from a Nord, that I might get from a TCL, I can get kind of the same I don't like it HDR look for a quarter the price. For like 25% of the price. And the photos are going to look kind of the same on Instagram. Blows my mind. And I'm getting a bunch of people telling me to hydrate. So I'm going to take a quick drink of water here and read through some more of the comments. From Hickey85. I'm in a group that we share pictures from mobiles, and there are some amazing shots coming from much cheaper devices. As a rule, there's a rule that you can only edit on mobile apps too. We've got a little photo sharing on our Discord too, and well, I mean, O'Shea is schooling us all. His HDR processed photos from the Nokia 9 are stunningly good. But when we're sharing shots and it's coming from a variety of phones across multiple price points, and I'm looking at them through a browser or I'm looking at them through the Discord app, and you're like, I'm not seeing it. there is a photographic composition that I can achieve. And so when I show the differences, like I love in my Sony review, I showed this butterfly photo where it's almost backlit, sunlight is streaking through. You can see some lens flaring in bright daylight, but it's such a soft image, perfectly focused on the back of the butterfly. The antenna are perfectly crisp and the wings are just starting to fall out of the plane of focus. And like that feels like a photograph. It doesn't look like this hyped up, manipulated image that came from a phone just to belch out on Facebook. This looks like it could have been a print, like it's a little softer. It's a little more washed out. The detail isn't over sharpened like crazy, and it just looks so good. That's the kind of thing that's making me really excited about some of these other experiments. The hardware is empowering almost micro four thirds performance in our phones. We don't have control over the aperture. We don't have different lenses, blah, 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 blah. But we're closing in. We're closing in on like my Panasonic cameras bolted to the backs of our phones. We're getting there. There's something really interesting happening. But if we're just going to run it through these gross unicorn barf, social media focused algorithms, then it kind of doesn't matter. It kind of doesn't matter if you've got a nanocell pixel binning, 9:1 pixel binning sensor on your Galaxy Note Ultra. It's gonna look just as juicy and vibrant as what you can get on a $300 TCL. If you're just gonna hype up the color to an insane degree, then why bother spending more? If you want to get more out of it, there's a reason to spend more. If you're just hitting the auto shutter button, we're done. We're done. $400. Done. It's great. So, Nord N10. Really, really positive feels on this phone. It's curious because OnePlus is no longer a brand for me. That enthusiast idea of OnePlus, especially when we were getting through the OnePlus 5T, the OnePlus 5T felt like a phone for me. It was like the third place audio competitor behind... No, the 3T was the third place audio competitor, but the 5T was still right up there with LG's. Again, I miss Axon 7s. But the 5T felt like that kind of peak OnePlus. This was the core idea of a refreshed phone every 6 months. Was the best price performance they could deliver. It just ticked so many of the right nerd checkboxes. Ooh, sorry, just bumped my table and probably just punched you all in the ear. Once we saw that shift, that change, a OnePlus 7 and a OnePlus 7 Pro, a OnePlus 8 and a OnePlus 8 Pro, I think it's been pretty clear. The brand has had to pivot. You don't survive if you only court the geekiest Android consumers, because we're kind of the worst customers. Like, we're the most insufferable. We're the loudest to complain. Our fandom is very fickle, as we're seeing right now. The number of people are like, oh, just OnePlus has lost their way. OnePlus has absolutely not lost their way. OnePlus is enjoying more consumer commercial success than they ever have. OnePlus just doesn't sit at our lunch table anymore. But that's what's making me so positive about this Nord N10 experience. I'm not picking up this phone and critically excited for me. And I'm saying, again, if you saw my Nord N10 video, I'm repeating myself here. But I'm critically excited because now I have more options to recommend for my family and friends. I'm really tired of my family and friends buying obscenely expensive devices that they are not using anywhere near that price performance. They are not getting their money's worth. And now I've got a Pixel I can point them towards. I've got a couple Galaxies, an A71 and an S20 FE. I can point them in those directions. I've got some iPhones in the mix. Really excited about the iPhone SE for some of my family who probably won't get a 5G rollout or good 5G over the next 2 years. And now a TCL might sneak in. A Nord might sneak in. These things help us keep the tech landscape healthy. From 2 years ago to now, the core consumer-driven experience has plummeted to that $400 price point. What we used to, like, we would only entertain, a level of performance at $750 and higher is phenomenally. I mean, just like what you get out of one of these phones is now it's just like radical evolution from where we used to be. Dave Burns, nerds are the worst. Matt Tyler, nerd. From McCorcoran Theory, when did OnePlus jump the shark? Was it when they got rid of the headphone jack? Okay, so getting rid of the headphone jack stung. I have a OnePlus 6 and a OnePlus 6T, and the phone I like to pick up more, even though my OnePlus 6T is that really gorgeous thunder purple phone. The one that I keep coming back to is the OnePlus 6 because it's got the headphone jack. I think the pivot for OnePlus properly happened between the OnePlus 7 Pro and the OnePlus 7T. That's really, for me, what solidified this is no longer a singular phone label. They are transitioning into being a more general consumer electronics option. And we should expect that they're going to offer more products at different prices. That, to me, was the real shift. They couldn't make the OnePlus X work back in the day. They got hit hard by Qualcomm not supporting that chipset for future updates and improvements. There's always been some idea of OnePlus trying some of these other experiments. As soon as we saw OnePlus 7 and OnePlus 7 Pro, that to me went, okay, they're looking at Samsung, they're looking at Apple, they're looking at LG, big phone, little phone, less expensive phone, more expensive phone. That's the turn. As soon as they stopped making one phone, they became a different brand. So even if you lose a feature like a headphone jack, that's kind of a bummer. But the OnePlus 6T still represented that core idea of OnePlus makes one phone. And then the OnePlus 7 started us in a different direction. And now the Nord, I think, kind of completes us on that on-ramp. We've merged into traffic. OnePlus is now on a different course than where they were 2 years ago. On TK Bay, LG is also still getting in there with the K series. The Stylo fans are rabid. Man, it's so funny. Like, you take certain phones just for granted. Oh, Stylo 6. It's a cheap phone. It's got a stylus. Oh, whatever. The people who use the Stylo are hardcore. That is their phone. Again, it's a very small pocket little community, but they are passionate. I've been getting a lot of requests for that new K series, especially against this Nord and how it might compete too. Matt Tyler saying Realme needs to come to the USA. These other brands that make these ultra low cost options probably can't come here. I mean, really, it's so frustrating to kind of like try and hammer this out, but they don't come here because of different data protection laws, different licensing, different carrier arrangements, certifications through our wireless standards. They don't. Again, I do not believe you could mass produce and make some of these other low cost options for the United States at the same price tiers and have the same profit margins. I think the margins would either be even leaner, or they'd lose money on sales, or they'd have to raise the price. And if they're raising the price in the United States, it kind of defeats the purpose of trying to bring that low cost option here to the USA. Until 5G calms the F down and we can like more easily make a 5G radio built into our processor chipset like we had with LTE modems and radios, I don't think it's going to happen. I think you're going to have to make purpose-built solutions like the N10 for the United States, as opposed to being able to offer one Nord for everyone. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest otherwise. Sony phones, really expensive, LTE only in the United States. Some of the gaming options that we've seen, like the Nubias and the Black Sharks, 5G with limited 5G support in the United States and not much distribution and no word on support or long-term support for software, like updates might not be a thing. But yeah, you can technically get a Snapdragon 865 and a really high refresh rate display, but the phone might not ever get substantial updates. I don't know. I mean, has anyone been using that Nubia gaming phone? Because I really haven't seen it. At least not in a purpose-built, United States sold, supported, and warranted kind of fashion. It just doesn't, it's not a thing. Some folks like Goran and Aditya sharing some love for the LG G7. My wife's LG G7 took a tumble. The back glass cracked even through her super rugged bumper case, and it's time to move her on. And she's looking at setting up a Pixel. She's probably going to go with a Pixel 4a. So I think she's kind of off the LG train. I handed her the Velvet, and I was really pushing that hard. I really thought, like, out of all these different pros and cons and 5G, and you really still want a headphone jack, just hold this. Like, check out the Velvet. And she's not confident, considering she just broke the G7. She's not confident that the curved glass on the Velvet will last as long, and it's taller and it's bigger, and she kind of wants to go with the smaller phone. So Pixel 4a, headphone jack, smaller form factor. She misses out on 5G, but that's probably going to be her jam. I don't know. Again, it's the right fit for her, but I was a little sad. Like, I was like, you might really like this Velvet and it's really pretty, but I totally get it because her purse kind of destroys phones, and it's really hard to keep her in phones that aren't broken. So Vazikos 8, why not the 4A 5G? Because the 4A 5G is bigger. She wants a littler phone. If my wife could go back, she would go back to an Alcatel Idol 3. The Alcatel Idol 3 was like this big. And I have little hobbit hands. The Idol 3 was a lil phone. And that lil phone had stereo speakers on it and a headphone jack and a reasonably good camera for its time on this mid-ranger hardware of its day. That would be her jam. That's what she wants, but no one makes that phone. And she doesn't want an iPhone, and she wants a fingerprint scanner, and she would prefer a rear fingerprint scanner, and she wants a headphone jack, and she wants little. So I'm really like trying to rack my brain. The only one that fits all of those criteria is the Pixel 4a, and she just has to live with the compromise of having an LTE only device. But honestly, from LG G7 to Pixel 4a, that's going to be a camera upgrade for her. So she's going to really like that camera, especially when she's running around after Lex. Sorry, just a quick stretch. We're coming right in on that 11 o'clock. I had a request on the Discord, just to share a couple thoughts. So we've been talking about phones in the $400 and less category. Some folks were asking if I had any thoughts on the Duo now that I've had it back, so we can spend a minute talking about phones in the $1,000 plus category. I am so happy to have the Duo back. If you caught last week's show, TK and I had a lot to say about different productivity phones. Someone got very upset in my comments that the title of the video said Note 20 versus Duo versus LG V60, and that we didn't talk enough about the LG V60, and that my whole channel is a sham, and that no one should ever listen to me for any advice. And I obviously must be the worst kind of LG hater to put that kind of clickbait into a video title. Nick Fell's asking if my wife held the Xperia 5 Mark II. So she did hold it. Um, it's taller. So a part of why she wants a smaller phone is also that height for where she reaches between the um, the notification shade and bottom gestures. And part of that can be complemented by the fingerprint scanner action on her LG. So she swipes the fingerprint sensor and the notification shade drops. But reaching from the top of the phone to the bottom of the phone, she wants less distance. So even though the width of the 5.2 is good, like that's the right width, it's still kind of too tall for her, at least too tall for what she wants. And then also, I think she's really sold on the idea of all of this covering more than what she needs. And that would be about, I mean, a little bit more than a third the price of an Xperia 5 Mark II. Like she's not wanting to spend $1,000 because she knows she's not really going to get $1,000 worth of use out of her phone. She wants to take casual point and shoot snapshots of Lex. She wants to use her cabled earbuds, and she needs to check social media. There is no reason for her to be spending more than $700, and she can get all of that minus 5G for $350. From ER1980, the rear fingerprint swipe on the Pixel series of phone is really underrated. Every phone that's had that kind of swipe, love it. Okay, anyway, real quick back to the Surface Duo. I am so happy to have the Duo back in house. I absolutely adore this little book form factor. It's silly, but I think one of the things I also missed tremendously from giving TK my full kit was my little fold-up Bluetooth keyboard. So having this back with my Bluetooth keyboard is kind of a beautiful little notebook writing, word processing, spreadsheet operating business solution. And I adore it. I mean, I've been burning through the battery on this, even though I've been trying to kind of keep up with some of my other review devices, just for having it be a really easy prop up video streaming solution. We're all kind of cooped up in this house. My wife is working from home. My daughter's doing school from home. I can't live in this office or my brain goes crazy. So taking this and my little fold up Bluetooth keyboard and one of the phones that I'm reviewing and just going outside, down to our pool where there's like a little glass table and I can kind of write on that in the open air. And I don't really have to do anything else. I just kind of prop this up and I can write on a script, has been huge. I would not be doing that if I had to carry a laptop with me and then knowing that my laptop battery life is not as good as this device's battery for doing that kind of work. That kind of stuff has really come home. I absolutely adore what it is that the Duo is really accomplishing. Some of the software gremlins are still annoying. I know they're working on it, and the beta versions of the launcher and the Microsoft keyboard have helped tremendously. But it's still like when I want to fire up a game and I'm in single screen mode, the phone still doesn't properly understand its orientation. So I'm still getting more of those apps that rotate 180 off. And that's kind of a bummer. The camera isn't great, but it's a really good selfie camera. So, I mean, I think it's fine for what it is that I think the Duo actually represents. But that's definitely a bummer if you're looking at your phone as being some kind of mainline content creation device. But the software updates have helped tremendously. Again, just like a OnePlus, we shouldn't expect embargo week software to be the final word on how these things evolve. And this really drives home what Microsoft has created is my absolute favorite Android tablet experience. This is how I want Android tablets to function. I want them to work a little more like Windows. And I want there to be an idea purpose built of multitasking on this sort of vertically split screen kind of orientation by default. Like if you just got rid of this seam, I could totally go for a single screened Microsoft Surface running Android. Instead of a Surface Go, you could give me this And I would really like this experience. Adding an LTE radio, data connection, a really powerful processor, all this other stuff is gravy. This really does contribute to the use of a portable computing slate form factor. So it's like, Samsung for premium Android tablets, and then this as a radical departure for a different type of tablet form factor. And those are kind of our only options in the Android space for really, really, really nice and expensive premium Android tablets. So the last thing, just kind of like the more I dig into it, the thing that's going to bug is Microsoft kind of screwed up their launch. Right? We know that there was a lot of distribution issues and manufacturing issues, and just getting the product out was kind of a chore. But, so quickly hitting the way that they've handled their price reduction, really annoying. If you bought a Surface Duo, you had like 60 days of price protection. But you had to return it, then buy another one. And you're like, that's such a pain in the butt. And if you did any kind of financing, or if you did a trade-in, all of that got real messy. So that's really, I think, the big gotcha for the Duo. I'm not angsty about having bought it on launch day at full price. And in fact, we did a little bit better than Note 20 Ultra owners, where Samsung, I think, did a price reduction on the Note 20 2 weeks after it launched. That's when they cut the price on the Note 20. So we can be outraged about the Duo, but let's also be frustrated on behalf of Samsung owners for a very similar, kind of gotcha. Like, oh, yeah, we'll cut $200 off the Note. Really, I think what's frustrating is seeing Microsoft sort of stumble. Their messaging isn't clear. I don't think they've done a very good job of educating, like, who is this product for and what does it do well? And then the follow through. We always expect phones and tablets to drop in price. We always expect these types of cost-cutting shenanigans, trade-ins, deals, specials. Microsoft does not play that game well. The Surface has never been that kind of product. And so to try and play that game with the Duo was not a good look for Microsoft. So it's a complicated set of feels, and my recommendation for a Duo is very narrow. But this is the best tablet I've used in a while. It's really good. It's a really good tablet, and I haven't had that in Android land since the Lenovo. That Flex Android tablet with the weird keyboard, which was fun and funky and still works. I mean, it doesn't get software updates anymore, and that chipset's a little underpowered, but dang, that thing is still good. So this year really kind of reinforced. I like dual display. I like folding phones. I like swivel hinge devices. These things are interesting, and they really do empower new use. If you're not looking to use your phone in a new way, spend less. If you want to get more, really displace other gadgets in your lineup, there's a reason to spend more, and it's fun, and it's really fun. This might not be the best year to try and sell fun, but I am having fun. All right, folks, I got to wrap this up. I knew this podcast was going to run a little long. I can't let it run too much longer. But follow up, please. I know I'm kind of getting back on track to a regular podcasting schedule again. Last week's show was fun with TK. We just kind of had to displace some of our news and some of our conversation. We're going to be back on track. And I want to look at trying to incorporate a few more guests moving forward, since the TK experiment worked better than I thought it would. Tons of stuff coming to the channel. The Nord N10 video just launched today. I've got another Patreon video that's going to be going to the Patreon probably tomorrow, maybe tomorrow morning, on the Pixel 5. I've got reviews for the Pixel 5 coming, the OnePlus 8T, the LG Wing. I actually have the LG Wing review shot. I just need to edit like crazy. The Galaxy Galaxy Note 20 Ultra camera deep dive is going to be coming soon too. And I also have some YouTube news to share. Just my relationship with YouTube and maybe doing some work with another outlet that's doing some other type of consumer electronics reviewing. There's a lot. So definitely stay tuned. We're out of Techtober, and I'm still fielding the fallout of Techtober. So I greatly appreciate all of you who have been along for the ride, joining conversations like these. This live chat was incredible. It also kind of makes me feel good. You know, different platforms streaming on YouTube last week. I saw not quite twice as many streamers, twice as many viewers. So this Twitch community is real. You know, it's not just like, oh, we'll watch you there, I guess. This is what I look for every Monday. This is the conversation I want to have, and it kind of fuels me up for the week. So I hope these types of conversations are fun for you too. I would assume they would be, or else you wouldn't keep coming back. But I'm going to have a lot more to talk about. So I want you to have an incredible week. I want you to do awesome with your technology. I want you to be awesome with your technology. And I'll catch you back here next Monday for another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. Take care. Be well. Still crazy out there. So keep your heads down. I want to see all these faces back. I'll catch you back next week.